Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer. This is another episode of my story. Now, if you've been watching these and have enjoyed them, you'll know that the last time I left you, I was telling you about being a security guard and that I'd worked at the Royal Festival Hall at the Heidelberg Company in Brentford. I always get these confused, Brentford or Brentwood, whichever one it is, the one in near Kew Gardens. And then I left you with a bit of a cliffhanger because I was going to tell you the time that I worked as a security guard at TVAM. Now, for those of you who don't know, TVAM, it's no longer going, but it was a breakfast television station, I suppose, or it was a programme. Now, I think it was the first ITV breakfast show. I'm not sure if it was the first breakfast television there ever was in the UK or whether it was the first ITV version that was to rival the BBC. But it was in the mid-80s and it hadn't been going terribly long. It was this great, well, I was going to say great big building, but quite an impressive building down at Chalk Farm in Camden Town in London. And I remember that there was this great big egg cup on the top of the building. And they'd obviously won the franchise to do this, and they'd built purpose-built studios and offices and all of that. It was a fascinating place and a fascinating place to go and work. And I had no idea, of course, when I was doing my security work, that I would get to go there. So I'd been doing these other jobs, and then all of a sudden there was this, we need an extra security guard at TVAM. Richard, would you do that? Yeah, no, sounds brilliant. Well, it was certainly an interesting experience, I can tell you. The first thing was, when I turned up, I was told in no uncertain terms that the security at TVAM was something that the TVAM people didn't want. They didn't want to have security on site. They thought it was a necessary evil, and we were just there for the insurance, really. The only time they wanted us really was at the beginning of the programme, when guests and the presenters would arrive and when the shows were going out. And I think they went out from something like 6 to 9:30, something like that, in the morning. And so the guests and the presenters would arrive during this early morning stint, and that was the time you didn't want your hoi polloi coming in off the street, and you can understand that. But the rest of the time, it was not broadcasting. Various bits of news were being got ready for the next day's 3.5-hour show. But we were sort of in the way. However, we were there, and there was a little office right at the entrance, had big sliding doors, as I recall, that would open, big glass doors, and people would come and go. And nobody really, the staff and all that, wanted to be challenged, but they all had to wear all the necessary badges and all of that they all do these days. And in the morning, of course, we had to be on duty. One of us had to be standing outside, if I remember rightly, just to make sure that who came in was who they said. So that was interesting. And I would work about, again, 12-hour shifts. So you'd turn up at 7 o'clock in the evening when everybody was pretty much gone home and there was not much to see and do. And you just stay around until the morning, till 7 in the morning. And there wasn't a huge amount to do. I don't think we had the clock thing where you were clocking in. There was usually about two or three of us overnight, and then I think, or may have been only, something like that. There was like 2 or 3 of us on all the time, and they had this little office, and you'd patrol around the building every now and again just to check a few things and make sure that nothing was awry, there were no windows open, and you'd walk around the exterior of the building to make sure there were no people loitering and that sort of thing, although there were cameras, so you'd have these little black and white screens, the old cathode ray tube televisions back in the day, and you'd see if anyone was approaching and all of that. In the beginning of the morning, about, I suppose, 4:30, something like that, people would start to arrive, and mainly the news teams would come in and pick up from where they went on and go and into their offices. It was an open plan building, and you'd had the studios down on sort of 2 levels. I think they called it the mezzanine level. That's just come back to me. So you'd come in on the ground floor where the studio was to the right, and then we were on the left. There was the main entrance with chairs and all that sort of stuff, and then there was this flight of steps, about 8 steps, something like that, onto the mezzanine level, and that, in almost a big semicircle, was the offices where the production staff was, and the news staff, and the presenters would have had their desks and all of that. And we weren't really involved in that. We weren't, once the building was full of people, that was a bit of a no-no area. You couldn't sort of wander around there. They really didn't want you there. The main bit was on the door, stopping, as I say, the riffraff coming in and making sure who was supposed to come in. So we'd meet the presenters when they came in, and that was fun. At the time, there was Anne Diamond was one of the main presenters. I forget who the other main male presenter was. Sorry about that. And there was I remember there was the weather girl. Now, I won't mention her name. I do know her name. But she was very full of herself. That's all I'll say. She thought that she was more important, I think, than Anne Diamond. Anne Diamond just came in. She didn't really say anything much to us and just left us alone and got on with her job. Some people were more snooty, let me put it like that, than others, and thought that they were the stars. And of course, we, being security, were effectively just nobody. We were the scum. We just happened to be, men in these silly blue suits. It's often how you felt. You felt that you were very much in the way. Annika Rice would come in and do the presenting when Anne Diamond was either ill or was on a break. And Annika Rice was brilliant. She would come in and have a good old chat with the security staff in the little room at the side. And she was lovely. And so, she was no airs and graces, and it was fantastic. Also, they had, at the weekend, Whacka Day. Now, many people will remember Whacka Day with, what's his name, with his mallet, Timmy Mallet. Mallet, you remember that, and Michaela Strachan. And there was another presenter whose name I've temporarily forgotten. Anyway, so I met up with both Timmy Mallet and Michaela Strachan. Michaela Strachan would, she was again a bit like Anne Diamond. She just sort of came in and did her thing. But I did have a chat with her a few times. She was very lovely. I remember she'd been involved in an accident, a car accident at some point, and there was a bit of a hoo-ha. Everyone was worried about it, but she was okay, and then she materialised again and everything was fine. And Timmy Mallet I managed to pin down one morning when he was in a sort of jovial mind, and I was asking him about how to get into television, how he got in, the best way to do it, and all of that. He started in radio, and this was really his television break, the Whacka Day, and that's where he sort of became a household name. And as a result of this, years later, I was to work with Timmy Mallet again in something called Timmy's Towers, and he was sort of making a bit of a comeback to children's television because he'd sort of been doing, I think, the university circuit and various sort of live events and other things, and he'd come back to children's television just when Nigel, my friend Nigel, and I had our Snug and Cozy series, and we appeared as Snug and Cozy on his TV show. Well, I'll tell you about that in another episode of my story down the line. But that was, oh golly, we're looking a good 10 years later. It's fascinating how these things turn out, isn't it? So at the time, and I think I asked, I can't remember, I'm just trying to remember if ever I asked him when we were working with him, when we were much more on friendlier terms, not friendly, sort of easy terms, instead of me being a security guard and him being star. Those terms when you could sort of have a chat. And I tried to remember him if I said, do you remember this security guard asking you questions? I don't think I ever asked him. Anyway, so that was going on. There was an occasion, I remember this quite vividly, they did this thing with football, where they would have a hat and they would pull out the names of teams. Now, I'm not a sports person, so I really don't understand how this works or what the point was, but they would bring out one team, and I suppose they're trying to get the fixtures together where they are random, and they did this on the telly where they would pull out and say, this team is playing that team in this league, whatever that means. So they did that, but on one occasion they had to present, somebody to one particular football team or manager or something was presenting this gold or silver cup, and it was very valuable. And the word went round is they wanted a security guard in the studio. I don't know whether there was no risk that anyone was going to burgle this cup, but I think they just wanted that sense that they would put a security guard in the back because it was a visual way of saying how valuable this cup was and how we were guarding it. So word came into the control room where we were, and there was 3 or 4 of us in there at the time, and said, well, we need somebody, I need a security guard in the studio. And nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to stand there on the telly. I said, I'll do it. You know, golly, bit of TV fame at last. So I went into the studio. Well, in the event, they didn't actually require, said, no, we don't, probably took one look at me and said, no, we don't want him on the screen. But I was just required to be off camera to guard this thing. So when this cup arrived and it came into the studio, I was basically accompanying it. Then they went on and did whatever they did, where they gave it to whomever they was. I can't really remember that. I was too busy looking at the cameras and the light. I mean, I knew the set fairly intimately because you would go into the studio overnight and have a look round, and I would sit on the morning sofa and all those things, and there's nobody there. I could sit and pretend to present. Nobody knew. Because you'd go in and just check everything, and as there was nobody in there, I'd say, hello, welcome to TVAM, I'm Richard Vobes, because it wasn't being filmed, obviously. So that was interesting because I could see how the TV sets were made up, and in years later working in television as an extra and as a walk-on and then in little sort of bit parts and things, I'd get to learn all of that in greater detail. Anyway, so that was that. And then I'd been watching the TV Whacka program, the kids program, because I'd been interested in kids program, and if you've been following this, you'll know that I had been invited up to Leeds Television when I was 18, and I'd written some children's scripts, and they'd shown me how TV was being created. So I had this, real fascination for it from this very early age. And so I'd been watching the Whacka program, and I'd had some ideas, and I wanted to know how to offer these ideas to whoever it was, one of the execs. But the thing was, I knew that they wouldn't talk to us, and they certainly wouldn't talk to a lowly security guard. What does he know? They'd talk to a professional writer or somebody like that, even a viewer coming in. They probably would have given more respect, but you were very much looked down at as a security guard. You were deemed to be a bit thick. That's why you were doing the job, because you couldn't do anything else. So I had these what I thought were fantastic ideas and great things they could incorporate in their show, and I typed them all up very nicely. And one evening when I came in, I knew where the producer of the show sat and his desk, and so I just put this folder on. Nobody was in because it was in the middle of the night, and the other security guards didn't know. I didn't tell anybody, and I just put this folder with these ideas on his desk and said, I'd love to have a chat with you about it. And I told him who I was on the security guard. Well, promptly after that, I was moved mysteriously to the car park. Yeah. I was moved into the little hut in the car park, which was a separate space at Chalk Farm across the main road, well away from the TVAM building. And my job then was to check that the people who arrived, that they were the right people. They had to flash their pass. I didn't work in the TV studios or at the door again and meet the guests as they came in. They had some very famous guests as they came in who you would, I can't remember them now, but at the time, you know, politicians and various people who would come in. Yeah, I was moved away from that and had to sit in a shed. So clearly, I was quite right. They certainly weren't going to take any nonsense from a security guard who had this unique position to put ideas on the desk of a producer and say, hey, I've got a few ideas. Not a word, never met the guy, just was moved. And so there I was in this hut, checking these cars and making sure. And it was a boring, very boring 12-hour shift in a hut, sometimes on very hot days in this uniform. And so in the end, I'd been on a mask making course and mask wearing course with Desmond Jones at the mime school a few months before. And so I brought in this mould that I'd made, and I would make papier mache masks. And I built a whole character set of these sort of commedia dell'arte type masks, which I later went on to use, and we'll find out about that in another episode. It wasn't too much longer that I thought, I've had enough of this, I've had enough of London, I'm getting out. I could see that London didn't want me, and I certainly didn't want it. And so that was my experience at TVAM, such as it was. Oh my Lord. Anyway, there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this. There'll be more of my very odd life, my story, next time. Thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, do give me a thumbs up. Become a patron, support what I do, and when we get good weather, I shall be out and about doing my normal walks and exploration. But in the meantime, don't forget to follow, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.